My fiancée called me too soft behind my back. So I canceled the wedding and gave her 2 weeks to move out, and then I never thought I'd be that guy, sitting on Reddit, venting about the collapse of my engagement. But here I am, typing out the slow unraveling of a 5-year relationship that I once believed was rock solid. My name's Grant. I'm 31, a systems architect based just outside St. Louis, and until recently, I was engaged to Leah, a woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. She's 28, works as a head of employee relations for a logistics firm, charismatic as hell, sharp in meetings, and, depending on the room, either charming or terrifying. I met her 5 years ago at a rooftop party thrown by a friend from college. She was fresh out of a breakup with this disaster of a guy named Trip, and she came in with that mix of bitterness and swagger that only someone freshly wounded can carry with confidence. She told me early on that Trip had been a train wreck of a partner, manipulative, moody, cheated on her multiple times, treated her independence like it was a flaw, and only ever showed affection when it benefited him. I remember sitting across from her at a sushi bar a week into dating, promising myself that I'd never be anything like that. I grew up in a different world, raised by a single mother who juggled 2 jobs and still managed to show up for every parent-teacher meeting. I learned early that love wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, consistent, dependable. I brought that same energy into every relationship I had, and with Leah, I went all in. For 5 years, I played the role of the attentive boyfriend and, eventually, the reliable fiancé, planning date nights, learning her favorite wine brands, folding her laundry the exact way she liked, asking for her opinion on every decision that could possibly affect the two of us. I thought I was being considerate, thought I was showing love. Now, I'm starting to think I was just grooming myself to be ignored. We got engaged 9 months ago after a weekend in Nashville. I proposed on a footbridge lit with string lights after dinner, heart pounding like a war drum. She said yes without hesitation, kissed me hard, cried a little, and we spent the rest of the trip floating on that electric buzz that only comes when you believe you're stepping into the best part of your life. We bought a townhouse 3 months later, just on the edge of the city. It was Leah's idea to split the mortgage, though I agreed to cover 65% since I made more, roughly $107,000 a year to her $74,000. The deal seemed fair. Everything did at the time. And then, 6 weeks ago, everything changed. I was at work on a Thursday when a migraine hit me like a freight train. The kind where your skull feels like it's collapsing in on itself, where light becomes an enemy and sound is a personal insult. I told my manager I needed to cut out early and drove home half-blind, hoping that some blackout curtains and silence might rescue my brain. I didn't text Leah. I thought maybe I'd get ahead of the evening, surprise her by making that Thai curry she liked, maybe lie on the couch with her later and decompress together. But when I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. Odd. She usually didn't get home before 6. It was barely 3. I assumed maybe she'd gotten out early too. Bad day, cramps, who knows. I came inside quietly, the way you do when you're not expecting to see someone until later. Her voice floated down from upstairs, echoing from the bedroom. She was on speakerphone. I caught her mid-sentence and didn't make a sound. My name was the first thing I heard. "Grant is just so damn soft," she was saying, and her voice held a sharpness I'd never heard aimed in my direction before. "He's always asking what I want, always trying to please me. It's exhausting sometimes. I swear, I wish he'd just take charge for once without asking me for a game plan." The laugh on the other end belonged to Kendra, her best friend since college, and someone I'd always felt a little on edge around. "You're so bad," Kendra said, her voice amused. "Didn't you just tell me he was husband material last week?" "I mean, he is," Leah replied, with this theatrical sigh like I was a pair of shoes she'd settled for. "He's stable and sweet and all that, but God, sometimes I miss the way Trip would just take what he wanted. Yeah, he was a bastard, but at least he wasn't so passive." I backed away from the door slowly, the air knocked out of me like I'd been punched in the gut by someone twice my size. I didn't make a sound, just turned, walked to the garage, and sat on the workbench next to my old tools, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. 4 years together, a home, a wedding in 4 months, and she was still talking about her ex like some Greek god of dominance. I sat there in the half-dark, wondering if everything I'd done had somehow become invisible to her. Was it my fault for not being more assertive? Had I mistaken her gratitude for love this entire time? I didn't bring it up that night. I wanted to desperately, but I also knew that if I came at her right away, she'd gaslight me. Say it was just girl talk, or she didn't mean it, or it was taken out of context. So I played it cool. Sat across from her at dinner, nodded as she complained about some new hire at her office, watched her laugh at memes she didn't share with me, and noticed, really noticed, for the first time how little she asked me about my day. We talked, sure, but most of it was about her. I realized that had always been the pattern. Me listening, her directing, me accommodating, her expecting. After dinner, she said what she always said. "Babe, clean up while I go catch that baking show, yeah?" Usually, I would have said, "Sure thing." But this time, I looked at her and said, "Actually, I've got some code to finish up for tomorrow's sprint. Let's both handle it in the morning." Her expression looked like I'd slapped her across the face with a wet fish. She didn't argue, though. Just blinked twice, said, "Okay, whatever," and walked out of the kitchen. That night in bed, I didn't roll over to spoon her. I didn't say goodnight. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, thinking about the thousands of tiny ways I'd shaped myself to make her life easier, and whether any of it had ever actually made her love me more. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to confront her until I figured out if I'd really become the doormat she thought I was, or if she'd just grown too comfortable with my silence. The next morning, I made breakfast like I always did, but only for myself. 2 eggs, toast, black coffee, just how I like it. When Leah came downstairs in her business casual blazer and heels, she stared at my plate like I'd grown a second head. "Where's mine?" she asked, like it had just slipped my mind to serve the queen. I didn't look up. Didn't know when you'd be down. "Everything's there if you want to make it." She blinked like I'd just asked her to cook for 100 people. "Are you serious?" Completely. I rinsed my mug, grabbed my laptop bag, and said, "I've got an early check-in with the DevOps team. Probably grabbing drinks with Marcus and Theo after work. Don't wait up." I caught her reflection in the hallway mirror as I passed. Mouth slightly open, eyes narrowed, like she'd just seen a stranger walk through her home. And maybe she had, because I was finally starting to remember the version of me I'd been before I became hers. Over the next several days, something strange began to settle over me. Not anger, not heartbreak, but a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years, like someone had wiped the fog off a mirror I didn't realize had been blurred. Everything I used to brush off or explain away now felt loud, obvious, undeniable. I started noticing just how much of my time had become managed by Leah's invisible clock, how most of my daily routines had been rearranged over time to suit her preferences without a single real conversation. She didn't ask me to do things, she expected them. Pick up her dry cleaning. Order more oat milk. RSVP to parties she committed me to without checking my calendar. She made decisions in our relationship like a CEO handing down directives, and I just accepted it like some middle manager, hoping for approval. But now that I'd stopped automatically saying yes to everything, it was like I could finally hear my own thoughts again. I tested the waters that first week with small changes. Nothing explosive, just moments of subtle resistance. I didn't bring her snacks while she watched her shows. I left the laundry in the basket instead of folding it on her side of the bed. I said no when she asked if I'd drive out to her coworker's birthday dinner on a Thursday night. Each time, she paused like she'd heard the word for the first time in her life. "You're acting weird," she said once. Not accusatory, more confused than anything else. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was finally acting like myself again. The shift became more obvious at a dinner party the following weekend, one hosted by Kendra, the same friend Leah had been ranting to during the call I'd overheard. Normally, I'd fade into the background at these things, laugh politely at her friend's jokes, let Leah dominate the conversation while I played the role of agreeable +1. But that night, something changed. Every time I offered a thought, whether about a show we were watching or a policy at work, Leah cut in. "What Grant means is," or "he doesn't really follow that stuff," or "that's not exactly how it happened, babe." She had done this before. framed me as the silly, soft, affable guy who needed her to speak for him. But this time I didn't let it pass. Instead of laughing or brushing it off, I just stopped talking mid-sentence, letting an awkward silence replace the space where my thoughts had been dismissed. The third time it happened, I saw Kendra's boyfriend give me a sideways look, curious, maybe even impressed. Leah picked up on the energy shift too. Her laughs came faster, more forced, and her wine glass emptied quicker than usual. On the drive home, she finally snapped. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, arms crossed as she stared out the windshield. "You barely spoke. You were cold and kind of an asshole, honestly." I kept my eyes on the road and asked, "Why do you think that is?" She blinked. "I don't know. You tell me. You kept cutting me off, talking over me, making me sound like an idiot in front of your friends." "Oh my God, you're being dramatic. That's just how we joke. Everyone does that." "No," I said, more calm than I felt. "That's how you joke. I'm tired of it." The rest of the ride passed in silence, but something shifted again that night, not in her, but in me. When we got home, I didn't wait for her to apologize or cuddle up on the couch and pretend nothing had happened. I went straight upstairs, grabbed a pillow and a blanket, and headed for the guest room. Her voice followed me up the stairs. "Grant, seriously? Are you mad at me right now?" "No," I called back, not turning around. "I'm just reassessing some things." That was the night the foundation of our engagement really started to crack. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Leah in the kitchen, something that hadn't happened in ages. She was making breakfast, fumbling through a half-burned batch of scrambled eggs and slightly over-toasted bread. "Morning," she said with a hesitant smile. "I made your favorite, and I used the dark roast coffee." I thanked her, sat down, and ate in silence. She was trying. I could see that, but it felt more like panic than change. I told her I was meeting Theo and Marcus at the gym later, that we were grabbing lunch afterward. Her face fell. "Wait, today? You didn't mention that. You never confirmed that we were seeing your parents today," I said, knowing she'd casually mentioned it last week like a throwaway line. "I already made plans." She stared at me like she didn't understand the language I was speaking. "My parents are driving in from Omaha. They're expecting us to tour Venus. We've had this on the calendar for weeks." "You had it." I didn't agree to anything. That was a lie, technically. But so was the way she'd claimed I'd committed to her plans without even bothering to check with me. For 4 years, I'd gone to every family dinner, smiled through every conversation with her dad about stocks I didn't care about, listened to her mom discuss floral arrangements like our wedding was a royal gala. This time, I was reclaiming a Saturday. I worked out harder that day than I had in months. Pushed through 3 full sets on every lift, let my chest burn and arms shake until I could barely breathe. It was the kind of exhaustion that felt earned, clean, needed. At the bar afterward, Theo and Marcus noticed. "You're different," Theo said, halfway through a beer. "Like, more present or something." I didn't give them all the details, but enough for them to get the picture. When Marcus heard about the wedding drama, he shook his head. "Man, the guy I met in college never would have put up with that. Remember when you canceled that weekend trip with Allison because she tried to change your plans without asking? You were the boundary king." "I forgot about that," I said quietly. "I forgot about a lot of things." When I got home that night, Leah was waiting on the couch in one of the dresses she knew I liked. Her hair, curled the way I'd once said looked incredible on her. "I made pasta," she said, trying for a smile. "Your favorite." I told her I wasn't hungry. She didn't push. But as I walked past her, I could feel her eyes following me like she didn't recognize the man she was living with anymore. And truthfully, neither did I. But I was starting to. Each day that passed, I reclaimed something small, my time, my energy, my voice. She tried to keep up, made more meals, asked about my day once or twice. But it always felt transactional, like she was running some damage control PR campaign. I didn't believe it. Not really. And then came the moment that shattered the illusion completely. One Tuesday afternoon, I got home early from a client pitch that wrapped ahead of schedule. Leah wasn't expecting me until 6. I came in through the garage, cut through the laundry room, and heard laughter from the living room. 2 voices, hers and Kendra's again. I paused at the hallway corner, hidden from view. "I swear to God," Leah laughed. He's going through some phase or something. Lifting weights, acting all serious, like he's suddenly some alpha dude. Kendra snorted. Let me guess, started using words like boundaries and self-respect too? Oh, totally, Leah said, still giggling. It's hilarious. He thinks this is some kind of transformation arc. Like he's gonna grow a spine, and I'll just melt. Kendra asked, but what if he doesn't fold this time? Leah's voice dropped, just a little. He will. Guys like Grant always come back once they've blown off some steam. He's not leaving. He's just playing tough guy. Once we're married, I'll remind him who's in charge. I stood there, barely breathing, as her words echoed through me like a knife twisting deeper with every syllable. I walked out without saying a word, and that's when the real end began. I don't remember the drive after I left the house that day, only the sound of my hands gripping the steering wheel like I was afraid it might slip out from under me if I let go. I drove without direction for close to an hour. No music, no destination, just the sound of Leah's voice playing on a loop in my head, laughing about my boundaries like they were a punchline, mocking the person I was becoming like it was some temporary glitch that marriage would fix. I'd spent weeks thinking maybe she was changing, maybe we were on the edge of something better, something more honest, but all that time, she was just waiting for the performance to end, convinced I'd eventually settle back into the version of me she could manage. That night, when I finally came home, the house felt colder than usual, like even the walls had heard what she said and were just waiting for the explosion. Leah was in the kitchen lighting candles like we were in some romantic drama. She turned and smiled when she saw me, her voice laced with fake warmth. Hey babe, I was thinking maybe we could watch that movie you've been talking about, make it a low-key night. I didn't answer right away, just stared at her for a long moment before asking, get a lot done with Kendra today? She blinked, and for a second something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe recognition, but it passed quickly. Just wedding stuff? She said with a small shrug. Nothing worth going into. Must have been funny, I said as I moved past her and walked toward the stairs. Wait, what's going on? She asked, her voice suddenly tense. Nothing, I replied without looking back. Just grabbing a shower. I closed the bathroom door behind me and leaned against it, heart thudding like I'd just run a mile in dress shoes. I wasn't going to shout or throw plates or storm out into the night. That wasn't me. But I also wasn't going to sit in silence while someone planned a life with me and laughed behind my back like it was all a long con. After the shower, I sat down at my laptop and started making calls. It took less than 2 hours to dismantle an entire wedding. I called the venue first, then the caterer, then the photographer. Each time I heard the words, non-refundable deposit, I nodded and said, that's fine. Because I didn't care about the money anymore. I cared about my sanity. I cared about the version of myself I'd almost lost trying to be lovable on someone else's terms. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and went to the kitchen before Leah was even out of bed. I didn't cook, didn't brew coffee. I set a plain manila folder on her plate, sat down across from it, and waited. She came down 10 minutes later, her hair in a messy ponytail, wearing one of my old shirts like we were still playing the role of an engaged couple. What's this? She asked, picking up the folder. Open it, I said, sipping my coffee. She flipped through the papers. Venue, photographer, catering, florist. All of it canceled. Every name crossed out, every confirmation signed and sealed. Her face went pale like she was reading a death certificate. You did this without even talking to me, she whispered, voice shaking. I didn't see the point, I replied flatly. She slammed the folder down on the table. Is this because of some stupid fight? Because I interrupted you at dinner? This is insane, Grant. I didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. I just set down my mug and looked her straight in the eyes. No, it's because I finally heard what you really think of me when you didn't know I was listening. That wasn't a fight. That was clarity. She opened her mouth to argue again, but I cut her off by sliding another folder across the table. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were apartment listings and a printed lease agreement. I'd already signed it. First and last month's rent were paid. A clean space, small but nice, not far from her office. What is this now? She asked, staring down like the floor might fall out from under her. A new place for you, I said. You have 2 weeks to move out. You're kicking me out? She snapped, eyes wide with disbelief. You can't do that. This house is ours. No, I said quietly. This house is mine. Check the deed. Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out. She looked like she was waiting for the part where I'd laugh and say I was kidding. When it didn't come, she took a step forward, voice cracking. Grant, please. Don't do this. I made a mistake. It was just stupid girl talk. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough to mock me to your friend behind my back, I said. It meant enough to laugh about me growing a spine like it was a temporary phase. Tears welled in her eyes as she crossed the kitchen and dropped to her knees in front of me, grabbing at my legs like she could physically hold the relationship together with her hands. Please, she sobbed, mascara already streaking down her cheeks. I'll do therapy. I'll change. I'll do anything. Just don't shut me out like this. I stepped back, breaking her grip. I'm staying at Marcus's place for a few days, I said, picking up my gym bag. When I come back, I expect to see boxes. She followed me to the door, still crying. Grant, don't do this. Don't throw away 4 years over something that can be fixed. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I'm not throwing away 4 years, I said. I'm walking away from the version of those years where I pretended to be happy while you pretended to respect me. I left her there, crumpled in the doorway, crying into her hands like her entire plan had suddenly come undone. When I came back 4 days later, the house was half-packed. She'd taken her clothes, most of the decor, and a few books. On the kitchen counter was her key and a 10-page handwritten letter I didn't read. I threw it in the trash without opening it. Some things don't deserve closure. Some things are already finished. She called me, texted, left voicemails, sent emails, even had her parents call once or twice to talk me down. I blocked every number, every app, every platform. The only message I responded to was from Marcus. Proud of you, man. And I was proud of me too, because for the first time in years, I was choosing myself. The house felt strange after she left. Bigger, quieter, not exactly empty, but filled with a kind of silence that didn't feel hostile anymore. I walked from room to room that first night back, trying to adjust to the absence of her scent in the hallway or the sound of her phone calls echoing through the walls, and the weirdest part was how peaceful it all felt. I didn't miss her voice or her routines. I missed the version of myself that used to believe he needed someone like her to feel complete. In the weeks that followed, my life began reshaping itself in ways I hadn't expected. I bought a new couch, one I actually liked. Dark gray leather, firm back support, not the soft beige one she insisted on that stained if you so much as looked at it with red wine. I donated a bunch of her leftover decorations, replaced the artwork in the dining room with framed prints of vintage maps I'd loved back in college, and bought a few houseplants that didn't require me to pretend I cared about succulents just to make her happy. I started hitting the gym consistently with Marcus and Theo, pushing myself harder each week. Watching the body I'd neglected over the years slowly return to something that looked and felt powerful. My shoulders thickened. My energy surged. I could see the lines of my old physique re-emerging from beneath years of softness that had come from always putting myself last. The best part was how it translated into other areas. My posture changed. My voice steadied. My attention at work sharpened like a blade. My manager pulled me aside one morning to offer me a new position, team director, managing 4 developers under me with a significant raise to match. The old me would have hesitated, worried what Leah might say about the extra hours, the extra stress, the shift in routine. But the new me said yes before the sentence was finished. I accepted the offer, shook my manager's hand, and walked out of that office feeling like I'd stepped into the future I was always meant to claim. By the end of the 3rd month, I barely recognized the man who had once made 2 cups of coffee every morning and waited for validation that never came. I started playing basketball again on Saturdays with a local rec league I'd forgotten I joined during the pandemic but never followed through with. I started reading again too, not just tech articles or productivity hacks, but actual novels, stories I used to devour in college before life got too noisy. I even signed up for a regional coding competition and made it to the final round, something I'd always wanted to try but never found the time for because Leah had filled every spare weekend with wedding expos and family brunches. And then one Friday afternoon, while waiting in line at a coffee shop downtown, someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, holding a cappuccino and wearing a denim jacket covered in enamel pins. I looked up to see a woman with warm eyes, curly dark hair, and the kind of confident smile that didn't feel performative. "All yours," I replied, sliding my bag to the side. "I'm Nora," she said, offering her hand. "Grant." We started talking, just casual stuff at first, movies we liked, weird coffee orders we'd heard in line, how she'd just moved back to the city after a stint in Boston for work. She was a UX designer, quick-witted, observant, the kind of person who asked questions and actually listened to the answers without waiting for her turn to talk. We talked for over an hour until she finally glanced at her watch and said, "I'm starving. Want to grab food with me instead of finishing your emails?" And I said yes, without hesitation. The dinner turned into a walk, and the walk turned into a second date the following week. We didn't talk about exes. We didn't need to. It felt easy, uncomplicated in the way healthy things usually are. She didn't try to fix me or impress me. She just showed up as herself, and I did the same. Somewhere around month 4, I ran into someone I hadn't expected to see again. One of Leah's old co-workers, Jen, who spotted me at the grocery store and did a double take. "You look good," she said, eyeing me like she wasn't sure if I was the same guy who used to carry Leah's purse at barbecues. "New chapter," I said with a shrug. She nodded and leaned in, voice lower. "Word is, Leah's back living with her parents. Heard things with her rebound guy. What was his name? Trip? Didn't go well." I just smiled and said, "Hope she figures it out," then grabbed my frozen peas and walked away. That night, I looked her up, just once, just to confirm. Her social media was still public. No engagement ring, no apartment, no curated wedding content. Just filtered selfies with sad quotes in the captions and the occasional passive-aggressive story about starting over when you gave your all. Classic. 3 days later, at 2:11 in the morning, my phone lit up. It was Leah, drunk, mascara smudged in the profile picture, voice shaky when I answered because I was curious enough to hear what rock bottom sounded like. "I know it's late," she slurred. I needed to tell you. Trip cheated on me. I thought I could fix it with him, but I messed up. You were the one who actually cared. I didn't see it. Please, can we talk?" I told her I'd call her a car. Waited outside with her until it arrived. She leaned into me as if I was supposed to catch her like old times, but I didn't budge. She cried the whole way to the Uber and asked if she could text me once she was sober. "No," I said softly. This was goodbye. I walked back inside, locked the door, and deleted her number for the last time. After Leah showed up that night, broken and begging for a second chance in the middle of the street outside my house, I half expected some part of me to crack, to flinch, to feel that pull toward the familiar pain I'd grown so used to calling love, to question whether I'd acted too harshly or walked away too soon. But I didn't feel any of that. I felt relief. I felt calm. I felt like I had finally finished mourning something that died long before I ever admitted it was over. Watching her slump into the back seat of that Uber, wiping her face and mumbling apologies she didn't even believe, was like standing over the burned-out remains of a life I no longer wanted to rebuild. The following morning, I woke up earlier than usual, brewed a cup of dark roast in silence, and stood by the window as the sun crept across the fence. I hadn't felt this weightless in years. There was no text to dread, no passive-aggressive comment waiting in the kitchen, no calendar filled with obligations that weren't mine. There was just stillness. And it was perfect. Nora and I kept things steady, never rushing anything, but also never circling around the obvious chemistry between us. We saw each other 2 or 3 times a week, grabbing drinks after work, hiking at a trailhead near her apartment, watching bad movies, and rating them like we were pretentious film critics with no credentials. It was the healthiest thing I'd ever been a part of, and every time I left her place, I didn't feel drained or unsure. I felt recharged. Seen. And not just because she was kind or funny or curious. She respected me, and that alone made everything different. A few months into dating, she invited me to dinner with her parents, which was something I'd quietly dreaded back when I was with Leah. With Leah, every family gathering had been a performance. I was expected to say the right things, agree with the right people, smile at the right moments, all while pretending I had a voice in decisions I was clearly excluded from. With Nora's family, it was nothing like that. Her dad asked about my work without pretending to know more than me. Her mom complimented my cooking when I brought over a bottle of red and homemade pasta. There was no interrogation, no false niceties, just real people talking like adults. That night after dinner, Nora took my hand as we walked back to the car and said, "They like you." I mean, I knew they would, but they really like you. I squeezed her hand and said, "Yeah, I like them too." By now, the house felt like my home again, not just a place I shared with someone who saw it as a stage set for their Pinterest life. I'd painted the bedroom a deep slate blue, installed floating shelves in the office, built a bench for the front porch that I actually used in the mornings. There was no more fake greenery, no more scented candles named after adjectives, no more being told my taste was too bachelor and not enough modern. Every piece of furniture now reflected me. Every room felt intentional. It was mine, finally, fully, completely. Work thrived too. That new leadership role paid off fast. My team hit 3 back-to-back product milestones ahead of schedule, and our client reviews were so strong, corporate bumped my title and salary again. I was leading brainstorm sessions, mentoring junior developers, and getting invited to strategy calls with upper management. For the first time in my career, people weren't just asking me to do the work. They were asking me what I thought about it, and then actually listening when I answered. And then, about 6 months after I'd seen Leah last, I got a message from Theo that made me laugh harder than I had in days. "Dude, check out Leah's new guy," it said, followed by a screenshot of an Instagram story. There she was, back with Tripp of all people, smiling through gritted teeth at some downtown lounge while he stared at his phone in the background, oblivious. According to Theo's friend, who knew someone in that circle, Tripp had already cheated on her twice since they got back together and was still using her car because he never got his license reinstated after a DUI last year. The younger version of me might have found some satisfaction in that, some sense of karmic justice in watching her spiral into the chaos she once glamorized. But I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt distant, like watching someone else's drama unfold on a reality show I'd stopped watching seasons ago. That wasn't my life anymore. That wasn't my burden to carry. I didn't hate her. I just didn't know her anything anymore. Not closure, not forgiveness, not even curiosity. Sometimes people break things they never intended to fix. Sometimes they do it out of fear or pride, or simply because they think you'll always be there to clean up the mess. And for a long time I was. I thought being dependable meant being endlessly available. I thought sacrificing my preferences and swallowing my pride were just part of how love worked. But love without respect isn't love, it's servitude with better lighting. 1 year after the breakup, Nora and I spent a weekend up in the mountains, renting a cabin with creaky floors and a fireplace that barely worked. We cooked together, played board games, drank too much wine, and stayed up talking until nearly dawn. At one point, she asked if I ever thought about the wedding I never had, if I regretted how it all went down. I took a long breath before answering. "No," I said. "Not even a little. I didn't lose anything. I got my life back." She smiled and leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in the quiet hum of the fire for a long time, saying nothing. Because some peace doesn't need a speech to be real. Some peace is just the sound of your own heart beating in a room that finally feels like home. And that's the end of it. That's my story. No big twist, no dramatic sequel. Just a guy who remembered how to be himself again. And that was more than enough.